From paying Daniel Ricciardo $18 million to leave the team, to witnessing Oscar Piastri's underwhelming F1 debut, is McLaren regretting its decision to switch drivers? Well, it seems like at least Lando Norris isn't too happy with the switch. After a pretty difficult race in Bahrain, it seemed like things had finally been looking up for the team. And I'm talking about when Oscar made it to the top 10 when starting the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. But it didn't even take 2 laps for things to turn around. Basically, Piastri made contact with the Alpine of Pierre Gasly right at the start of the race. And that left Norris collecting the debris, which ended up in an emergency pit stop. From then on, I wouldn't really call it a Grand Prix because it became more like a test, with Piastri overtaking the more experienced Norris, who said he could have easily kept the position at the end, but he let his teammate go. Quite the favor, if you ask me. Having said that, it seems like Norris isn't dealing too well with the change because it's starting to come in the way of his own performance. But isn't that something McLaren should consider right now? Not to mention, this wasn't an easy deal to begin with anyway. The team had to go through a lawsuit to get Piastri to sign a deal. Yeah, his Alpine exit was pretty intense and controversial, to say the least. Here's what happened. Basically, Alpine had to agree to an early exit before McLaren could step in, and the two teams had pretty contradictory contracts, and Piastri could only choose one. Eventually, the contract renegotiation board ruled that Piastri had a valid contract with McLaren for the next 2 years. And it was all because they just had to let Ricciardo go. Simply put, his disappointing 2-year stint at McLaren wasn't something they were willing to let go for another year. So they decided to end his contract a year earlier than expected. Now, obviously, that wasn't gonna happen without a hefty fine. And I'm talking about $18 million to be exact. That's right, the team paid him a lot more than you think, just to get rid of him. Now, his performance before 2021 put him in a pretty strong position for contract negotiations. In fact, that's exactly how he managed to secure pretty high salaries from Renault and even McLaren to begin with. But here's the thing. Sometimes we overlook the important stuff, and in this case, I'm talking about the details of his contract. Rumor has it, he was supposed to get a pretty great pay increase from the team in 2023, but that was only if the 3-year deal had worked out like they had expected. Instead, they went on to capitalize on Alpine's indecision regarding Piastri. And so, the team swooped in to sign one of the most highly sought-after talents in Formula 1. At the same time, they weren't exactly sure why Ricciardo was struggling so much in the first place. I mean, they eventually had to make a final decision for the team because his underwhelming performance wasn't helping anyone. Honestly, Oscar's journey to F1 is easily one of the most dramatic ones we've seen recently, so everyone's gonna keep a close eye on his progress. And let's just say it's been pretty rocky right now. Only time will tell how it works out for the rest of the season. But what about Ricciardo? Well, he has made a comeback to Red Bull, even if it's without a racing seat. Now, after the McLaren axe fell right in the middle of the season, the Aussie was left without a racing seat for 2023. Sure, he got a couple of offers from Haas and Williams, but he wasn't willing to move to the back of the grid. In fact, he figured taking a sabbatical would have been a lot better for his career, mostly because he was planning to make a comeback in 2024 anyway. But right when he was about to officially announce his sabbatical, Mercedes swooped in with a reserve driver offer for the Honey Badger. Now, rumor has it, the team wanted him to replace Lewis Hamilton, since his contract is gonna end once we wrap up the season. And after the first winless campaign of his career, it seemed like he was moving closer to retirement. But as soon as the rumor made headlines, the 7-time champion stepped in to confirm that he wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. If anything, he had his eyes on a record-breaking 8th championship. So that pretty much crushed any chances of Ricciardo making it back to the grid in a Mercedes car. That's when another familiar team stepped in with the same offer, Red Bull. But this wasn't easy. He was back with his former rival. Yes, I'm talking about Max Verstappen. Back in 2018, when Ricciardo decided to make the switch, the Dutchman had recently joined the team, and it was pretty clear that he was getting all the spotlight thanks to his incredible talent. Not to mention, the two were teammates at this point when the Honey Badger decided to step away. Now that he's back, he's a reserve driver, while Verstappen's won 2 championship titles in a row. And I don't have to tell you that this is a massive difference. I mean, the dynamics have completely changed here. So it's fair for a lot of fans to think that he's probably regretting his decision to leave Red Bull in the first place. But I wouldn't be too sure. At the time, Renault seemed like a great transition for the 8-time Grand Prix winner. And it worked pretty well for him too, right until he made the switch to McLaren. That's when things really started going downhill. Having said that, he really needed a break after whatever happened anyway. And being a reserve driver for a top team is the perfect way to do that. For starters, he gets some time off, because all he has to do is focus on marketing now. He can easily ditch the stress of overtaking other teams, at least for now. At the same time, he's still linked to a top team. So when all the teams are setting up the drivers lineup for 2024, you can be sure that he'll at least be considered for a racing seat. Meanwhile, a sabbatical would have completely ended his career. Not to mention, he wasn't ready to switch to any other motorsport series either, like NASCAR or IndyCar, despite the offers. It seems like he's got his heart set on Formula 1, and he's not planning to leave anytime soon. Having said that, 2024 is going to be the turning point in his career, because he's either going to get a racing seat or say goodbye to his F1 career once and for all. Let's face it, the Formula 1 industry is pretty fast-paced and unpredictable, to say the least, and it waits for absolutely no one. So it isn't gonna keep waiting for Ricciardo either, because even though the Honey Badger has given some amazing performances with 8 race wins, the 2 years at McLaren are something he can't erase right now. Having said that, it's a deciding year for the team too, because Oscar's performance this season is gonna determine whether the switch was even worth it. And it's only a matter of time until that happens. As for the first few races, it seems like he hasn't had a lot of luck so far. But let's see if he manages to catch up. Until then, here's my question for you. Do you think Oscar Piastri is going to prove to be a better driver for McLaren than Daniel Ricciardo?